Mike Preisner from the Empire Files, did an interview with, I believe it was someone who had been released from Guantanamo. Was it from Guantanamo?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
And they basically said that Ron DeSantis was brought down there, showed up there, and was involved in the torture of prisoners.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was Mansour Adayfi, and you can read this in the March 2023 issue of Harper's under the headline "See No Evil." He was a detainee, a former detainee at Guantanamo.
And was the interview was recounted in there? Is that it?
Harper's republished the section of the this Preisner piece.
And that has kind of sparked some digging from other outlets now more recently, like the Washington Post and the Guardian. And it's fleshing out. I mean, it seems irrefutable that he was present for this stuff and force feedings.
Well, his denial is like that he wasn't high-ranking enough to be doing torture stuff. Which,
let's hear. He's asked this question, and then we can fill in some of this story. Here he is at a. This is him in Jerusalem. He is doing a world tour, ostensibly visiting all of the authoritarian governments he can. To get pointers, maybe, and to share. I believe, he's got some. I think some of his campaign people are actually working over there at the moment. But here is Ron DeSantis being questioned in Jerusalem.
During your time at Guantanamo, did you witness any incidents?
No, not all. That's BS. No, totally BS.
Did you say you were present during those feedings? Is that
Who said that?
Detainees have told us that.
How would they know me? Okay, think about that. Do you honestly believe that's credible? So this is 2006. I'm a junior officer. Do you honestly think that they would have remembered me from Adam? Of course not. They're just trying to get into the news because they know people like you will consume it because it fits your preordained narrative that you're trying to spin. Focus on the facts and stop worrying about narrative.
Pretty defensive. Nothing to see here.
Pretty defensive, and it's clear he was there.
Yeah,
I mean that's not in dispute at all, is it?
No,
he admits to being a junior officer there,
and his role was supposed to be there as someone who's there to oversee the military officers and guards and make sure that they were not committing any violations. That was his role on paper, but what was revealed, it seems, is that one of the prisoners said, "Can you please report the abuse to the higher-ups?" Asked him for it, and that's the one who says they recognize him. Seems like that didn't happen. And then the other said he was present for the force feeding protein shakes through tubes shoved up a prisoners' noses because they were on hunger strike because of the outrageous conditions. And then this morning, The Guardian says he was around when there were multiple prisoners who died at Guantanamo.
Think if you would remember the person who was in the room for this happening to you, right? Torture as a mechanism. This is from the Gaddafi interview with Preisner. Went on a massive hunger strike in 2005 and there was force feeding. It was torture. I saw a fucking handsome person come in and he said, "I'm here to ensure that you're treated humanely." And Preisner says it was Ron DeSantis, and he says yes. And they said, I'm here to, like we said, like ensure that everything's being done, up to board here. And then what happened is Ron DeSantis was there watching. We were crying, screaming. We were tied to the feeding chair, and he was watching. He was laughing. Our stomachs could not hold this amount of Ensure. They were force feeding them with Ensure because of the hunger strike. They poured one can after another. So I would just say I'd probably remember that guy.
Yeah.
This is just reading from the Guardian here. The future of Florida governor and Republican presidential contender had been assigned to Guantanamo 3 months earlier as part of a small legal team tasked with ensuring the guards and other military personnel followed the law. He was the most junior JAG in the camp, but after 3 deaths on the night of June 2006, his superior officer, Captain Patrick McCarthy, ordered him to start collecting initial evidence. It's unclear when exactly DeSantis became involved in the investigation. Some of the witness statements mention an unnamed JAG at the scene in the early hours of June 10th. McCarthy did not respond to a request for comment, but confirmed to the Post he had ordered DeSantis to gather information. I cannot tell you specifically what DeSantis did, but said his subordinate was probably, quote, involved in the facilitating access to information, trying to make sure that privileged information did not get swept up. He would have been one of the folks that I dispatched to help facilitate the investigative effort. I mean, the bottom line is, I mean, what's clear here is that none of this, as far as I know, none of this was reported publicly prior to the detainee from Guantanamo saying, I remember DeSantis from there because I remember when this guy became governor. And so, like, we know for a fact that DeSantis was there. And we know that there's no way this detainee could have known that unless he was aware of him being there during that time. So at the very least, in that denial that DeSantis had, DeSantis knows he is denying actual facts that are established. And the idea that the guy remembered him, we know that's the case here because there's no way that guy could have known that DeSantis was there had he not remembered him there.
Yeah.
And now we have confirmation that he was there. And so really the question isn't whether this guy remembered DeSantis. The question is, did DeSantis do what this prisoner said he did? And DeSantis did not deny that. He denied that this prisoner remembered him. And we know, again, from this timeline, that the prisoner clearly did remember him. Now, maybe the prisoner has decided to make up what DeSantis did in that moment, which would be odd because you would expect someone who placed someone in that room as torture is basically happening. And if that person was helpful or defensive of the person being tortured, it's hard to imagine that that prisoner would turn around and implicate DeSantis. You know, I think it's like fairly basic human nature that if you're being attacked and someone is doing anything to inhibit that attack or even to not participate in it, you have a certain sort of like, I don't want to say affection towards that person, but it's hard to imagine that you would put that person out to dry. Yeah. I mean, this,
exactly. And
this better be pursued more. I mean,
I hope so.
Yeah.
But I mean, given like how we've treated Guantanamo prisoners in this country up to this point, I don't have a ton of faith. But like what's also interesting here is how DeSantis reacts when he's out of his comfort zone of like Club for Growth fundraisers and handpicked kind of Florida media members of his press conferences where he can control the atmosphere. If he was smart, I mean, he would own it. If Trump was involved or a lawyer for one of the Guantanamo involved in like that torture regime, he'd be like, yeah, I was doing what I could to protect my country. DeSantis just doesn't really meet the moment here, and he gets really defensive when he could have just had I did this to protect America. That would go over well with Republican primary voters.
Well, I mean, but he's got this problem, right? I mean, he's got this problem because he knows not necessarily going to go over with the rest of the country.